Oh. Okay. Get some papers organized and we'll be ready. Okay. Ready to call the meeting to order. I would ask Jamie, I guess, if you could give us a roll call, please.
Bond. Bout.
Here.
Crawford.
Here. Here.
Bobia.
Here. We are. All right. Number 2 on our agenda this evening is any agenda changes, additions, or deletions that anybody has on the agendas put before us tonight. I don't know of any myself.
I move that the agenda be approved as presented.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
Chris? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the agenda is kept as presented. Number 3, approval of minutes of the regular meeting held on January 8th, 2026. I was not intended, so I would,
I have a change, please, Jamie.
okay,
Item 6B, motion by Bauk, supported by Crawford to elect Kubasik as chair. That's true. But I did not make a motion for me to be the vice chair. That was someone else in the meeting.
you didn't nominate yourself?
I did not nominate myself.
Well, that may want to be corrected, might look a little one-sided.
Yeah,
Well, I wondered about that, but I
Yeah.
couldn't remember exactly. Didn't we maybe handle it with one motion though? But not that you necessarily were part of.
no, I think we voted on each. There were separate motions because yes,
Motion by Bout, supported by Crawford to elect Bosiak as chair. About, okay, do you know who that motion was? I can go back and look.
Oh, if it was separate, which you say, then
Yeah.
we don't recollect who
Yes,
were
I
the
can-
parties.
Yeah.
Change that, so you can, include that in your motion.
Okay, I move that the minutes for the meeting on January the 8th, 2026 be approved with the recommended revision to item 6B.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
We have a second?
Oh, support.
All right, Richard seconds it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. We amended the minutes from the January 8th, 2026 meeting.
Yeah.
At this time, on number 4, we would open to the public if there's anyone who would like to make any comments on the agenda items. There's a limited 3 minutes, but these are agenda items. And there are comments later on for anyone more towards the application later, but if there's anyone right now who has anything they want to say online, I guess in-house. Nothing we know of, so, all right, so in order to do that, do I need a motion to close that? I don't need a motion to close that, do I?
No.
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 All right. Takes us down to item number 6, which is new business. And that is a dimensional variance request for 250 Mason Street, Saugatuck. And what I'd like to do is go into that application and call that hearing to order. And ask for the summary by the zoning administrator. In this case, I believe, David, you would be able to do that for us online?
Yes.
Thank you. And make sure you have your updated.
Updated one, yeah.
Yeah,
You got the one with the red.
with the red, with the red notes to it.
That's the one I'll have online here.
Okay, yep, all right. Okay, go ahead, David.
Okay, good evening. Yes, David Jurasik, the consulting planner, filled in for Grayson. He earned himself some time off, so he's enjoying the weather down in Texas.
Uh,
So I'll give you a brief overview of the application, and then from there, we'll have to have a public hearing on the variance request and then walk through the four standards of approval. So just as background, the applicant requests a variance to allow an off-street parking lot, and part of that within the required 5-foot landscape separation strip along the north property line of the property. So this relates to section 154.134 G1 of the zoning ordinance. And that's so that says it's a screening requirement in the parking section that says all off-street parking shall have a properly maintained landscape separation strip at least 5 feet in width along all property lines and streets on which the off-street parking is located. So if you had a chance to look at the site plan, they do show that at least 5 feet around all sides except for that north property line. Quickly into some background on the use and zoning. The applicant plans to renovate and retrofit the existing church building for the purpose of establishing a bed and breakfast establishment. The property is zoned R4 City Center Transitional Residential District, and bed and breakfasts are a permitted use in this district. The lot is conforming just at the absolute minimum. It is 8,712 square feet and 66 feet in width. So that those are actually the minimum requirements. The building footprint is just about 2,600 square feet of that total square footage. So it takes up a good chunk of that land as well, the existing footprint of the building. Also, it's important to understand just the parking requirements just for background. A bed and breakfast requires 1 parking space per 3 sleeping units. So for this, there's going to be 9 guest rooms as well as the owner occupant quarters. So that'll be 9 spaces for guests and 2 for the owner occupants. Parking spaces have to be 9 feet wide and 20 feet in depth. And then there has to be an aisle, a drive aisle of 22 feet between any rows of parking. So with that, the applicant is proposing the 11 spaces, and only 4 are required by the zoning ordinance. So a bed and breakfast could be established with off-site on-street parking, but in this case, the owner wants to accommodate all of the guest parking and the owner occupants on the site itself. So to fit 11 spaces, there really needs to be a double row of parking. In this case, there's 5 along the back of the building and 6 along the north side. And with the drive aisle of 22 feet in between these 2 rows, that's really the only way to maximize parking is to encroach into that 5-foot north screening separation strip. So if they were to comply with the zoning ordinance and to have the 5 feet around the entire parking lot, they would really only be able to do in my opinion, an 8-space parking lot. So that's 3 less than they're proposing. So in this case, they could reduce the amount of on-site parking and rely on-street parking, but we all know the demand for parking, especially during the tourist season, so that is difficult. The other option is they could reduce the number of guest rooms. So there are some options to do something in a compliant manner, but by right they can develop a B&B with this number of guest rooms, and they would like to accommodate those guest spaces on site. Lastly, before we turn it over, section 154.155B outlines the standards of approval. And as you all are very aware, there needs to be positive findings for all 4 of these standards in order to grant a variance. The first being strict compliance would prevent the use of the property, or compliance would be unnecessarily burdensome. 2, the variance would do substantial justice to the owner as well as adjacent property owners. As well as you have to consider whether lesser relaxation would also provide relief and do justice to others. The third is that the plight or problem is based on unique circumstances and not general neighborhood conditions. If they were general neighborhood conditions, it wouldn't be unique, and it would be something that we would prefer to handle in the zoning ordinance as an update rather than through a variance process. And then lastly, the problem is not self-created or based on personal financial circumstances. So we did place in the report a few observations. Certainly, you can argue some of these points either way, but we tried to give it some pros and cons or different arguments each way for all four of those standards, just because our role is to take a pretty strict view of these standards and ensure that if we are approving variances, that we can provide positive findings. So with that, I'll turn it over, and if you have any questions, I'll be here, as well as Attorney Trent Cunningham.
Okay. Well, thank David. Pretty thorough. All right, at this time, we'd like to ask if there's anyone from the present that would like to present from the applicant, and if so, please come to the podium and state your name.
All right, thank you guys for reviewing our request prior to today. My name is Kendra Skierhorn, and I am the property owner along with my husband, Curtis Skierhorn, who could not make it today at 250 Mason Street. I have a little bit of background that David already covered, but I will go over it. Just a little background as well. My husband is the general contractor on this project, just so you kind of have an idea of our investment and time into this entire project of converting from a former church into a bed and breakfast. A little bit about the project, David kind of already spoke to this, but we are looking to preserve the current structure. It is a contributing resource in the historic district, so that is something that is important, that we are not able to modify easily the outside of the building or the footprint in which it stands. The project is slated for 9 rooms in the overall project, and then the owner's suite in the lower level. The proposed use of the building has already been reviewed and approved by the city's zoning by Grayson. All external changes for the project have been approved from the historic district, and we do have our building permit through MTS already. A little bit about the parking scope in which David talked about. And because of the building size and placement on the lot, there's only an available amount of space for the parking in the back. The church actually never had any parking or a driveway previously, since the building was moved down from the top of the hill in 1914. You know, we are working around an existing contributing resource. I looked back at old photos, and the paved road was not even there when the building was originally set in its spot. So we are working with that. So we have the 11 spots, 1 for each guest room, and then the owner occupants as well. And we will be living on site, and so part of that is, 2 cars. It's really important to us. It is a pretty centralized location close to downtown, and so being able to have those spots for us is important as well, to be able to utilize the back area to bring in goods and toilet paper and things for the property, instead of pulling up in the front on a primary corner lot there on Mason and Griffith. So we do think that's important to be able to have those spaces as well, to not take away from our guests, and the parking on the street as well. Our parking spots, as David mentioned, do fit all the ordinance minimums, so we're not asking for any changes in terms of the maneuverability lane of 22 feet or the parking spots of 9 feet by 20 feet. The plan in which we presented is 11 spaces. Technically, we could actually have 12, but the last spot we are choosing to utilize for HVAC screening to take away that 12th spot, instead of putting that on the west side of the building, which would have also been an option. The fire department and city engineer have looked at the plan in which we have showcased for you today, and have tentatively approved that pending, today's meeting and the outcome of this variance request. The variance request specifically relates to the 5-foot landscape separation strip on the north end of the property. Due to the depth and the footprint, we cannot get that 5 feet in without asking for forgiveness on that. So we are proposing a 6-foot cedar fence along that north property line. We feel as if that actually might provide a stronger visual screening from the parking, then even potentially a 5-foot landscape strip there. So that is what we are proposing in lieu of that. Obviously, we don't want to put a fence on the property line and then have the 5 feet inside of the fence. So we feel as if the fence will do justice for the property to the north compared to the landscape strip. And just in closing, we are very invested in this property and, you know, making sure that this is a good asset to downtown Saugatuck and providing opportunities for those that stay with us in the community. And so we just ask that the board, you know, review our variance request and work with us as we continue to try to make this project something that we're proud of in the community. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, and you're Kendra, is that
Yes.
correct? We probably will, as we get a little further into the, into the public hearing. We also have, as we go through this, we ask for anybody that's for or against after you speak, and then we read any correspondence, which we have some. And then we will go into our own deliberation and speak amongst ourselves, and I'm sure we'll have some questions at that point in time.
Yep.
Unless someone wants to have one right now.
I have just one quick one. Kendra, this drawing, is this based on a professional survey?
Yep. So Naderveld completed a survey in July before we purchased the property. So yes, that is Naderveld's original property survey with, you know, the new markings and everything to scale. So that's
And
what it's based
the
on.
flags on the lot were put there by Naderveld?
The flag on the corner I put there just as a marker for the patio. But if you do need, I don't know if Grayson gave you a copy of the survey as well, but Grayson has the copy of the survey that goes with the,
And
you know,
it shows
drawing.
That exactly, okay.
Yeah, yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else at this time? Questions for Kendra? Chris, Richard?
Well, I don't know if it's for her exactly that, but it meets the setback requirements, the 5-foot buffer strip in all other regards other than the north
Correct.
boundary line.
Yes.
And even, you know, against Griffith Street and everything.
Yeah. And they would have the buffer on the west side
Right.
already. It's just the north side, adjacent to the residential driveway.
And, okay, and you did, you know, maybe I missed this, but it's apparent you did a survey. There, in those survey, I noticed today those sticks are in there. And obviously, we believe that's the accurate and current survey.
Yeah, the only, like I said, the only thing that is showing on the property, if you go, is that flag that I put there for the corner of that one lot. And that was me planting the patio, if you will, on the west patio, not the
There's a
parking.
metal stake on,
There,
against the driveway. Is that, do you know what that is?
I think, yeah, so then there is a stake, on the driveway with there is a property corner on the northeast side with the pink flag. That was Naderveld, but it got ran over. It's a little bent, but it's right on the driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then imagine we'll be talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Kendra. All right, at this time then, now the applicant has presented their information. We ask if there is anyone in the building here that would like to speak anything in favor of or against the applicant's information that's been presented. And again, no one online or anything. We have no one else in the building to do that. So what we will do is we will move on and we will go to any our correspondence in supporting and or opposing. And we have one letter of correspondence, and I believe that's all, right, Jamie?
Yes, that's all I'm aware of.
That's all we have. So, Jim, you want to read that letter if we can find it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The letter is from KD Lake. It's dated March the 12th, 2026 at 5:19 PM. And its subject is citizens' comment regarding variance request for 250 Mason. To the Zoning Board of Appeals, I am Catherine Lake, the owner of the property immediately north of the parcel requesting the variance. I would like to respectfully share several concerns regarding the request to waive the required 5-foot landscape separation strip along the north property line of the off-street parking area and replace it with fencing in order to accommodate 11 parking spaces. I would first like to acknowledge that I understand why the applicant would want to maximize the number of parking spaces on site. As we all know, especially during the summer season, parking in Saugatuck can be very difficult because of the large number of visitors to our community. Many of us experience the same frustration, so I understand the desire to reduce reliance on on-street parking by providing additional spaces on the property. First, under the City of Saugatuck parking requirements, the applicant is only required to provide 4 parking spaces. Even with the required landscape buffer in place, the site could still accommodate 8 parking spaces. Because reasonable parking options exist that comply with the ordinance, I am not certain that the situation meets the standard in the variance criteria that the ordinance requirement is, quote, unnecessarily burdensome, end quote. The variance does not appear to represent the minimum necessary deviation from the ordinance. The request is being made specifically to allow 11 parking spaces rather than 8. 8 spaces would still significantly exceed the 4 spaces required by the city's code. The additional parking appears to be more about maximizing capacity rather than addressing a true hardship created by the ordinance. Second, the proposed fencing would be located directly along my driveway. Although the plans show the fence stopping approximately 17 feet from the end of the driveway, the proximity of the fence to the driveway could create visibility concerns when backing out. Reduced visibility may increase the risk of conflicts with vehicle accidents on the roadway. Third, the fence's proximity to the driveway could create operational issues during winter months. Snow plowing and clearing the driveway could become difficult with a fence located so close to the driveway edge, increasing the potential for damage to the fence by snow removal equipment or even cars parked in the driveway throughout the year. Finally, I have a question regarding the property line location. When I purchased my property in 2020, the property line stakes appeared to be located within the tree line. Currently, the indicated property line appears to be located directly at the edge of the driveway. I understand that a survey based on the legal description was completed, but given the significant implications for the placement of fencing and parking, I would appreciate confirmation that the property line has been accurately surveyed and marked. For these reasons, I respectfully request that consideration of the variance application be postponed until the property line can be confirmed and the potential safety and operational impacts associated with the proposed variance can be more fully evaluated. Thank you for your time and consideration. Catherine Lake, 230 Griffith Street.
Okay. Nicely presented and some good information for us to take a look at and consider. I think now that we have no other supporting or opposing, and that one was probably a little bit in both, no more general comments that I know of, that we'll go into our closed session amongst the board members and have our discussions and review the standards. So at this point, we will discuss.
Could I ask some questions of Mr. Jarosik?
Sure.
David?
Yes.
Are you there, Dave?
Yes. Yep.
This is Jim Bauk. I've read what's in the package, which pertains to off-street parking. Number one, is that off-street parking or is that a parking lot?
It is a parking lot which is off-street and on-site. So it is considered, well, I'll
Okay,
scroll to the ordinance here, but that is off-street parking is required for certain land uses, and this is a district that does not exempt the parking requirements. So they need to accommodate a minimum number of parking spaces on site.
Well, the reason I go to that is 154, 142 screening. The intent of this section is to promote the public's health, safety, and general welfare by minimizing noise, air, and visual pollution, to improve the appearance of off-street parking and other vehicular use areas, and require buffering between incompatible land uses. Section D goes on, screening between land uses. Upon any project for which a site plan is required, or whenever a non-residential use or multiple family dwelling, and I'm assuming that this bed and breakfast would become a multiple family dwelling, abuts a residentially zoned or used property, screening shall be constructed along all adjoining boundaries with residentially zoned and used property. So that screening can be a buffer. But in this case, a buffer, it says the required screening may be accomplished by the following methods, and it lists several. Number one is a buffer zone at least 10 feet in width, consisting of living plant materials, to maintain a minimum opacity of at least 80%. Number two is an earthen berm, and number three, a solid wall or fence meeting the requirements of this section, at least 5 feet, but not greater than 6 feet height, measured on the side of the property having the higher grade, measured horizontally. And then in section G, parking lot landscaping, there are some other requirements. Separate landscaped areas shall be required either within or at the perimeter of parking lots, 1 tree for every parking space, 8 parking spaces. And so I'm wondering why that section does not apply. Because that would require either a 10-foot buffer or a fence, and the fence that's proposed would seem to be compliant with that.
Yes, well, first off, the site plan review was conducted administratively, I believe. I believe the applicant said that it was conditionally approved. I was not involved in that site plan review, but those requirements would have been part of the review of the bed and breakfast and change of use, and for the parking lot itself. But there are different standards under 142 screening versus the requirements. The specific variance that is being sought is within a different section of the ordinance, which is in 154.134. So you have two sets of screening and buffering requirements in a way in two different sections of the ordinance, and they would both apply. If they were, let's just say if they were to satisfy the requirements for the buffering by the fence in one section under 142, they would still need to meet the other requirement in 134, which is the landscape separation strip. So in my opinion, it is a little bit inconsistent to have screening and buffering requirements concerning parking in two different sections, but ultimately, the ordinance does require there to be that separation strip between parking and adjacent property.
Well, the 142 goes further, as you and I have discussed. Section, I guess it's H5, in 142, the screening section, which is the more difficult one to accomplish. It's the larger one. This one requires the 10-foot, but at the bottom of that, the last paragraph in that section says the zoning board of appeals may require or waive any fencing, screening, landscaping, or buffering as may be provided for in this section as a condition of a variance or other authorization in whatever manner necessary. And then this is the important part: to achieve an identified public purpose. The zoning of a board of appeals shall record the reason for the coordination and clearly specify what is required in any approval granted.
And that's under 154
142.
or on the screening, right?
Yes.
So the
So,
bottom line there is the question of how does screening come into it? The word, that section play into this 152, 154, 134.
134, I think, is off-street parking.
Right, but your questioning is,
Screening and fencing, this,
screening and fencing is not in that portion,
no, it's not in that. It's covered separately in 142.
right? And should it be, or is that your question? Why-
Well, it is, whether it should be or not, it is.
That's the question. It is.
So the standard says whenever you have competing requirements, the more severe shall be the controlling one.
The more severe, yeah.
So it would seem like this is the controlling one. And a fence accomplishes what's required here. So you don't have to have, according to this one, a buffer zone of at least 10 feet is one of the ways to do that. A fence, and it clearly says the screening between land uses. Whenever a non-residential or multiple family dwelling abuts a residentially zoned or used property, screening shall be constructed along all adjoining boundaries with the residentially zoned or used property. The required screening may be accomplished by the following methods. And number 3 is a solid wall or fence meeting the requirements 5 feet high, more than 5 or less than 6, says you don't need a 10-foot buffer
If you have the fence,
if you have the fence
or a 5-foot buffer,
or a 10-foot buffer.
or a 10-foot, or a 10-foot.
But what am I missing, David?
Okay, well, I guess first off, there is sections requiring screening that are different. 154, 134G, and then 154, 142 screening. So I'm recognizing that there are 2 different sections of the ordinance that require screening.
Yes,
And then in 142 screening, you had quoted section H5, which gives zoning board of appeals the ability to waive those requirements, fencing, screening, landscaping, or buffering, as may be provided for in this section. So when that was read, H5, when it says waive the requirements of this section, our interpretation was that this section is the requirements of section 154.142. But then we have the other section, which is related to screening of off-street parking, which is, in our opinion, a separate requirement, and it doesn't have that, a similar ZBA waiver authority, non-variance waiver authority. So that was the way that we had looked at it. But I do see this as a little bit inconsistent in a way that there's screening requirements in 2 different sections and a ZBA waiver authority through a non-variance process in one of those, although the request is for the other section. So maybe I'd like, Trent may have a comment or 2 on that as well, but that's just the way that Grayson and I had looked at that in terms of ZBA authority to waive or go through the variance process. Because H5, it would not be subject to the strict standards. It'd be a little bit more discretionary and maybe a little bit more reasonable than a strict variance standard. So it does have a big impact on which authority you use and the resulting standards.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the way you're reading it, though. I think I agree with your point that H5 is a relaxed standard, and it even says here that as a condition of a variance or other authorization. And so I don't even know that granting a variance would be required to waive anything in 142. I, however, don't think we can get around the requirement in 134G1 unless there was a variance granted. And I realize that there's somewhat I don't want to say that they're not really conflicting sections. I think they're sort of different. One of them requires, as one of the options, a 10 feet screening, or I'm sorry, a 10 feet separation strip or buffer, whereas the other one is a 5 feet separation. So I don't think they're really conflicting, and I think it's fair to say that they might have even different regulatory intents. Like where I think I read G1 as maybe applying more to, and 134 G1 as applying more to concerns with vehicles being parked next to the property. So like exhaust, for example, would be something that would be an off-street parking consideration that you maybe wouldn't necessarily have in just a straight screening situation. So in a situation under 142, where you might require screening for various different reasons. I don't know that they're conflicting, and so I don't think that there's a way to get around 134 unless there was a variance granted. Would you agree with that, David?
I agree too, and I also think maybe the intent of 142D screening between land uses is it doesn't necessarily consider parking there.
Hmm.
That may be a situation where it's the parking is on the other side of the building, yet this 142D is going to be the requirement to where you have to do D1 through 4 between the building and the property line when you're adjacent to that other use. Um,
Right.
the only thing I want to mention too, Trent, is when we say non-residential, I know the city attorney's office has looked at B&Bs in terms of commercial use versus being a residential structure for building permitting. Is there any thought with it considering it residential for the purpose of this requirement, or would you say that's only for building code?
I I think that's limited to building code from a strictly legal standpoint because I think to have a binding interpretation as to whether or not a B and B was residential or non-residential, that determination would have to be made by the zoning ordinance itself. Um, because like the state definition from the building codes wouldn't necessarily control in the zoning context. So I don't know that it's like dispositive either way. Um, and I'm not aware of a requirement or I guess a definition or a clarification as to the nature of a B and B in this in the order. You might know that though if there is one, but
Well, a B and B would seem to be a multifamily. And that's the point that's addressed here is you've got a multifamily adjacent to a residentially zoned property. So this would seem to be directly applicable, and 142 specifically says, the intent of this section is to promote the public's health, safety, and general welfare by minimizing noise, air, and visual pollution, to improve the appearance of off-street parking and other vehicular use areas, and require buffering between incompatible uses. So it seems to be direct, to me, it seems to be directly applicable. And it seems to be the controlling standard in this case because it's the more severe of the two.
Sure. And I think in any case, the fence itself would satisfy that requirement.
It would,
In
absolutely.
but it would still be, the fence does not alleviate the need for a 5-foot separation though, which is the case here. And then the only other comment about the residential, so if the definition of bed and breakfast establishment does say a residential building occupied by the owners or resident manager, along with accessory guest buildings. Um, and I know we've worked through that definition in previous cases. So
Mhm.
I know we're talking about a residential building, but that it probably goes back to Trent's original point too. It's a commercial use of a residential building. So and I don't know if Grayson had looked at that at all as part of this determination, but I think in any case, it is an on-site, off-street parking lot, which is subject to 5 feet of separation. And I still think the other requirement can be satisfied by the fence, but we still have the issue of 5 feet of separation between a car, the end of the edge of the parking lot and the property line.
Yeah, and as far as the comment about the more strict standard controlling, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, especially as applied here, because they're not identical standards. So like there's like somewhat different. I get that they both touch on screening and buffers and stuff, but I don't know that it's not like we have a one-to-one match on the standards and we're just changing a number. Um, and as a like I guess matter of law, I'm not sure that that even would really apply anyway, because I think both standards could be applied in this instance, and I think that's probably the correct reading.
So
Well,
conflicting a little
it,
bit.
you know, the ordinance clearly says when you have conflicting standards, the more restrictive shall apply. And it seems to me that 142 requires a 10-foot buffer between parking and residential use. And the other standard requires a 5-foot buffer. So it would seem that 142 would be the controlling standard and the other one would be not applicable. Well, we're gonna go with whatever you say. I'm gonna go with whatever you say, but that's my understanding and reading of it.
So what we have in front of us is, of course, the request for the parking amount of, number of parking spaces.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what's in front of us. Of course, as it says, and so when we go through the standards, we're looking at, excuse me, the burden or anything that the four standards ask us of how it meets, if, what their request for 10 parking places has, and that providing the 5-foot landscape. That's what we're being asked of, right?
Well, that's the original request based on the other standard, but
Yeah.
if 142 is the controlling standard and they put in the 6-foot fence, they're compliant and no variance is required.
If you go with that.
Yeah,
If you went with
if
142.
if that's the controlling standard, which is the more restrictive of the two that would seem to come into play.
So prior to us going, as we stick with our deliberation and discussion, going into any standards, we could act at this point, say the board is comfortable with what's put in front of us of one, like it is, and making decision and reviewing the standards, or we could ask to table it and get clarification, more clarification on which, if it's 142, if it is more restrictive. That could be one of our thoughts tonight.
We could do that as well, yes.
That's one of our choices. We could wait, we could table it and say, hey, we need to know exactly which one of these is either more restrictive or which one we're looking at, or we can proceed, with this. So I think that is a question at this point in time. It sounds like, at least I hear what you're saying, that, we have our, our legal and our zoning administrator consultant here with us tonight. And I think with the bottom line from what even Jim was saying earlier is, it brings up a good point. Between the two of you, do you feel that is worth us proceed or tabling and getting clarification on that? We ask for your guidance.
So I think that if that would definitely provide an option for us to have a more sort of thorough discussion about it, and we could even provide an opinion. And I think it's maybe a close enough question that it would call for an interpretation from the zoning officer to even have sort of to settle the issue, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I do think there's some benefit to that if that's the route that the ZBA would want to go. My only comment, and before I turn it over to David to see if he has any other thoughts, would be when you make that motion to postpone, if you do, because it is a public hearing, I would just recommend that you note the date when you will be reconsidering that, which I assume would be the next meeting. So the date and time that public hearing would be reopened and reconsidered. That way the city doesn't necessarily have to renotice it as a new
And
public
my,
hearing.
my memory of postponing is that's usually the case. You can schedule a special meeting prior if is needed. But that can also be accommodated. I remember from the past.
Yep.
But that takes
Yeah.
a little bit of doing. So Dave, goes back to you a little bit.
Yeah, well, and again, we could certainly look at those two different requirements and have, working with Grayson, ultimately he makes the call. And again, we could also refer this back to you to make a formal determination of the requirement itself. So, ultimately the zoning board of appeals can, uphold or overturn or revise any zoning administrator determination as well. So this could be back in your on your plate to make your decision on the applicability of these two requirements as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, if we don't postpone it, if we make a judgment tonight, then they would have to reapply if it came back under a different, in a different, if they were trying to come back with this sometime and bring it back, they'd have to start all over. If that section wanted to be, let's say, the applicant wanted to contest it and come back on it, right? If you table it, then we would have clarity on it.
Yep, it could be postponed to the future meeting. Brent, I almost wonder if that was the direction they were going to take, if there could be an agenda item immediately prior to make a determination on that. If we provide the background analysis,
Yeah,
or you'd simply, if you didn't want to act on it tonight, postpone to a future meeting, and we could just simply provide a justification for why we believe this requirement applies in this case.
Yeah, I do think your point would work though. Like if we scheduled it to be immediately after the interpretation, assuming it came to the zoning board of appeals for an interpretation, then either the variance would be necessary and we could just move to that agenda item, or it wouldn't and we could just, it would be kind of a moot point and we could just remove it from the agenda. So I think that would work. That seems like a reasonable way to handle it.
Well,
I'm not sure if I followed. You follow that?
yeah,
Yeah.
here's where I'm at, just my thinking. I'm basically in favor of approving this, and I'm looking for the easiest way to do it. I think it is compliant according to 142 with the fence that they put up. I also think that what they're doing is serving, according to the standard here, to achieve an identified public purpose.
Right.
That allows us to waive any of those, but we don't need to waive anything because they're putting up a 6-foot fence, which is compliant according to that standard. But it gives us the ability to waive for an identified public purpose. And in this case, the identified public purpose is public parking in this town. We don't have enough. It's the biggest, hottest issue in this town right now. So to have a 5-foot barrier, a 5-foot grass strip inside of a fence that nobody's going to see makes no sense to me at all. The fact that regarding the lady's letter, I appreciate her letter and it's very well written. But the fact that they put their driveway immediately on the property line is their right. They can do that. But the applicant tonight has the ability and the authority and the legal right to put a fence on the property line. So that's a moot point. It really doesn't matter. Both people are legal there. So,
Well, I tell you what, let's, I think we have Trent, and you can, make sure I'm saying this straight. Over the years, there's two ways. I would like to see us review the standards amongst us and have any more discussion that we have on based on what Jim's brought up. But review the standards. You can vote on each standard as you go through each one, and you don't have to because we've done that for years before. You can wait till you're done with all the standards and then go back and make a motion whether it meets or doesn't meet all the standards. So I would like to hear us go through the standards. I think the board would be good for us to say, what does this, the way it's presented to us right in this letter, and as we understand what our requirements are, that we could see whether they're, is self-created or whether there's unnecessarily burden or whether they're, and then go back to looking at whether and discuss through those standards what it is we could see where it meets or doesn't meet them. Because that would be a big deal, whether as the way it's presented in front of us, whether we feel it meets all four or not.
yeah, and this is, on its face, it seems straightforward, but this is a difficult case because you can make, and they have done so in the write-up for us, you can make a legally valid argument for each of the standards either way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit of, well, I won't make my comment yet on the standards, but, as we go through them, I'd like to do that, but it is very, very, you can go, sometimes we don't have very many places to go, whether we can hang our hat on something and go one way or the other. And sometimes there are a number of them here. That's what we're saying. And it could go one way or the other, but there are a number of them.
Yeah.
Pick one or don't pick one. It leaves this particular one leaves a lot of interpretation up to the zoning board of appeals. So. with
And
that,
I appreciate them writing the package that way to present the pros and cons so that we
Sure.
can have this discussion.
Yeah. Phyllis, anything, Richard? How do you
No,
feel about
There's
this?
a lot here. I don't, after hearing, I'm not sure that it matters so much. What I was struck with originally was within the first 20 words of your good analysis. You said, well, it's obviously multifamily, multifamily usage. And I guess my question is, does it matter if we deem this to be actually, it's an in. The proposal is for an in, which in my mind, I mean, just what I'm thinking now is different than what I would normally term multifamily. So is it going to make a difference if we deem it to be multifamily or simply an in? And of course, then there's a definition of an in. And I think it's a major difference. However, in listen to the analysis, I'm not so sure that it is what do they say? It's a difference without a difference or whatever. I mean, is one of them would indicate more the 10-foot buffer or the fence? I mean, I'm also hearing what you're saying is even if you use the more restrictive ordinance, the fence would still meet it.
Yes, that would fully satisfy that ordinance
That's-
requirement.
Yeah, so maybe it doesn't matter if you call it, but so the question to the folks on the screen is, does it matter if this is defined as a multifamily residential or as an inn? And, does that matter? And then can you answer that in like 52 words or less?
As far as whether or not section 142 would apply, I don't know that it makes a difference because it says whenever a non-residential use abuts a residentially zoned or used property. And back to what Dave and I were kind of considering, it's a little bit unclear as to whether or not a B&B would be considered non-residential or residential use. But I think for purposes of tonight in this exercise, it's probably fair to say it is non-residential. It's a commercial business. And so it would be a non-residential use abutting a residentially zoned or used property. So I think like as a threshold matter, that 142 would apply probably. I think where the distinction is, or where the hang up is it's like, does this apply and then 134 does not apply, or can they both apply? And that's kind of where I think the distinction needs to be made.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
In that regard, I have fallen back in several cases, we've had this where you have competing requirements, the more restrictive shall apply. That's in the ordinance. So it would seem to me a 10-foot buffer is more
That's
restrictive.
always been the ruling governor.
But I wonder, like, is it like, and I don't mean to make this more complicated than it is, but just for purposes of thought, like, there's three different options in that section for what would satisfy the screening requirements. One of them is a fence, and that's the one that we're saying may allow this to be conforming. Is putting a fence up that is at least 5 feet but not greater than 6 feet less restrictive or more restrictive than a 5 foot buffer. Like, I don't know that that's clear. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that it's clear. That's not a one-to-one thing, which is what I was trying to explain probably inarticulately before, is that like I'm not sure that you can say that a fence requirement is less strict or more strict than a 5 foot buffer. That's where I'm kind of hanging up on because I see
Well,
your reasoning, but
I see your point, and the 142 standard said a fence is equivalent to a 10-foot buffer, because that's another way to satisfy the same requirement. Or an earthen berm. It said any of those is satisfactory, so it's saying a fence is equivalent to a 10-foot separate buffer.
yeah, and I think that certainly is a reason that could factor into the board's determination if you were asked to make a determination about it. I just, in the absence of that being expressly stated in the ordinance or in like through a formal interpretation, I think we're sort of assuming that that would be the case just because they're comparative standards. There's a lot of other stuff going on. So like, and again, I don't mean to make this overly complicated, so feel free to cut me off, but a buffer zone at least 10 feet in width consisting of living plant materials so as to maintain a minimum opacity of at least 80%. So like there are additional requirements beyond it just being the 10-foot buffer. And that was why when I was comparing it to 134 earlier, I think is why you could also make the argument that they're completely different standards and that both of them could theoretically apply. So I realize that it's kind of like into the weeds on this a little bit, but um, I'm not sure that it's just as a matter of like law, automatically these are equivalent standards. I think you would need to have some sort of formal either ZBA or zoning administrator interpretation to make that determination.
All right, so how about this? If we go through the four standards relative to the request on the 134,
Right.
and then if there's a motion, we include that the fence would satisfy 142 additionally. Because if 134 was satisfied, it would be
Yep.
satisfied with the
Yeah,
fence,
Yeah,
with the variance and the fence.
yeah, whether it's approved or denied, one way or the other, you'd
Yeah.
have to, you could reference both, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris, you had a
I have two questions.
question.
First one, maybe you can answer. What was the intent of 134 versus 142? Why two standards for buffer?
I was just going to mention that, and I almost feel that the one that's up for variance this evening, which is 134, it may be just for the purpose of backing vehicles away from the property line. So because the characteristics of a parking area are going to be different than the other 142, which is the characteristics of just a commercial use, a commercial building that's going to be set back, or an outdoor eating area or something like that. Whereas a parking lot, there are vehicles parked. The public purpose may have been just to provide that separation of a vehicle, the noise from an engine, the heat, the vibration, the whatever it might be of a parking lot, even the heat island effect of a parking lot, to back that off of a property line. Just to give that little bit of a buffering, regardless of the other requirement, which is more related to the land use itself. So I think we have one that's related to land use, buildings, activity, where 134 is related to parking surface and vehicles and their separation from a property line. So I think there is two different purposes. I don't disagree with the comments, though. I think there's a little bit of an overlap, but I think there maybe is a public purpose for one versus the other.
Yeah, because what threw me off was 142 specifically says to promote the public's health, safety, and general welfare by minimizing noise, air, and visual pollution to improve the appearance of off-street parking and other vehicular use areas, and provide buffering between incompatible land uses. So it specifically mentions off-street parking.
Yeah.
So the ordinance is duplicitous.
Well, and I have a niggling comment, and I don't see it here, but I've heard it made reference to. Is there not, we talk about setback, there's a fence setback, and this whole thing is not going to be 6 foot long the whole way. There's an area from the right of way on Griffith Street where normally in the fence ordinance, only certain portions of the fence can only be 3 feet high. Is that not so? Isn't there a certain distance from the right of way perhaps that the fence can by ordinance only be 3 feet high, or am I wrong in that? And-
It's, since it's a corner lot, and the ordinance allows for a 6 foot fence on the secondary front yard on a
And
corner
this can
lot.
go will this also, I know front yards can only be 3 foot.
Does the fence go all the way to the sidewalk? Or is it
Does
held
it go
back?
all the way to the road right of way?
I think it does show to the right of way, but I believe there is actually a 1 foot separation requirement. So I believe that fence would actually have to be cut back at least 1 foot.
Our plan
I don't know that I
doesn't-
can see where the
unless I'm
fence
wrong,
is,
our
do
plan
you?
doesn't show.
I can't see where the fence stops.
Yeah, I don't see on the
Plan
plan
doesn't
where the
show
fence
it's an
starts or
incomplete
stops.
plan to begin with.
Well, and that's a good point, that if you look at you can see the fence post.
I make is good points.
Yeah, the post seems to be about 4 feet, so maybe they do intend to keep it off the right of way, but there is that 1 foot separation required.
Well, but at least there's no point where it goes from a 3 foot fence to the full 6 foot.
That's correct. It can be 6 feet in that location.
Cut it off.
Oh, okay.
For the purpose of the neighbor's comment, when someone would be backing up, there's a point where you got to be able to see oncoming
Yeah.
traffic.
That is also a practical, what I was getting at was, well, no, it's not gonna be, we're talking about a 6 foot fence if it's not
Yeah.
all gonna be.
Now, we have a situation right down the road, Mason Street, where there is a dividing fence that we forced between the property right down here behind the SCA,
Right.
where they built the 6 units or 8 units.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a parking residential right beside it.
Yeah.
And they were originally asking for no break, landscape break. Because the neighbor wanted to be able to back out, do a boat and different things, not have any kind of a barrier or fence. We denied that, and they put up a 6 foot fence which divides that property right down the road from their property.
Mhm.
So that alone, and I can't remember if they stepped that down or not, at all towards the end. But, nice looking fence. And that was a situation where, now there is about a 3 or 4 foot piece of grass on the other side of it.
I've seen this, and back when I was on the planning commission and whatnot, I've seen it. The front yard, you can only have a 3 foot. Now, I've seen it just for that type of thing that you mentioned, so that people are backing out of their driveways can see that. And then now that you say that, as we all know, on a corner lot, which is where the church is, both sides act like front yards,
Mhm.
ordinance wise.
Yeah.
I don't know so I don't know how they could have a full 6 foot fence. I don't know. I am not as acquainted as I used to be with the ordinance, but
Well, it can only go to the property line anyway, so.
I'm saying now we're getting into other issues a little bit in terms of traffic safety. That might come into play there. But anyway,
Well, it's not our job to design the fence. Our job is to decide whether or not the fence.
no,
meets the
but if the fence ends up not being the full 6 foot, then it has ramifications on what we're talking about.
Well, I
In
think
terms of if it
I think
requires it.
the fencing standard somewhere, and I don't have it here, I'm sorry, does say something about how close it can be to the street. I think that's buried in there somewhere.
Okay.
Mr.
All right,
Chairman, would you like me to
Okay.
read that section?
You say you have it?
Yes, it says, for corner lots, fences located within a side yard abutting a side street shall not exceed 6 feet in height measured from the surface of the ground. All fences in the side yard on a side street shall be located at least 1 foot from the public right-of-way or sidewalk and shall not prevent clear vision of an intersection or driveway. So it does address the concern of the neighbor about the clear vision from a driveway. And it does say that it needs to be backed up 1 foot from the right of way or sidewalk. So that 1 foot is the standard. There is a clear vision area like measurement, but that's only for when it's an intersection of a street. There's not a standard for when it's adjacent to a driveway, except for that 1 foot separation from the right of way.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
My second question is for legal. Can we do anything with this if we're gonna make it a 142? Because this document refers to 134. So are
Well,
we
that's-
gonna have to?
Yeah, that's why we said earlier, we could either, well, we can say, let's table it and look for any, for better clarification. Although we've gotten a fair amount of clarification, we could go back and just double check that and then make a decision on another meeting. Or my suggestion was go through the standards and see how we feel about the application the way it is, whether it meets the standards, the way it is presented to us. And Jim's point was, there's always this situation where you say, well, which one you hang your hat on? And that's it. That's what it boils down to me.
Yeah, so if we chose to approve it, in our motion, we could say that this approval also carries with it the satisfaction of the 142 section as well.
Yeah.
If we denied it, then the applicant would have the opportunity, I think, to appeal it under the other standard and say which applies. That's my take on it. Brent?
Yeah, I think you guys are accurate. I think tonight you could either give a variance under 134, and then under that flexibility that's built into 142, you could make a determination that the fence would satisfy it. And I think the fence does probably meet the standards because it does allow for a fence. If you were to deny the variance under 134, the applicant would have appeal rights, and I think that their appeal would likely be limited to whether or not they met the standards as to 134, because that's what their application is for, and that's what the ZBA would be considering it as. And so I don't know that 142 would necessarily come into that in an appeal posture, but I do think that given where it's at tonight, that would be kind of your options would be to either give a variance for 134 and then make a finding as to 142. Or deny the variance as to 134, which then kind of makes it a moot point at that point.
Remember, we're still, aside from, there's two parts to the request. One is the number of parking places. The other one is the landscape. Right?
No, I think it's one issue.
It's just the landscape and not the number.
Well, I was wondering why this
Because-
eight alternative was thrown
Make
in.
sure we understand that when we read.
Well,
the
eight
standards.
is in there because if we denied it, they can still build a parking lot with 8 spaces, technically,
Oh, yeah,
by
you're
right.
Yeah,
See, that's what plays into the
I see.
question.
So,
That's what plays into the question of the standards. Is there a hardship or unnecessary burden? Is that, how does that read in the standard?
I see, yes,
So
okay.
do you really feel that,
That having
Yeah,
8
yeah,
parking
that's great.
spaces is a hardship.
if we do the landscape buffer, we're asked for the landscape, which allows them to do 4 to 11 is what it does, right? They could do any of those 4 to 11. And so the question really is, so you're saying it is only about the landscape, it's not about the number.
No, we could say that if we were to approve it, we could say that we are granting this variance under the condition that 11 parking spaces be provided and tie them together so that it doesn't become a parking lot for commercial vehicles or anything else.
Well, that's the reason they're in front of us. It's about.
Yes. Yes.
More so than the landscape, I think, but.
well, and I appreciate the justification that you provided for, other than that, I'd be loath to get into the judgments about city parking at this point. I mean, I understand that I also, if it's a kind of an odd ordinance that you'd have an inn and only require a third of the parking, you know,
Yeah.
where these other, in Saugatuck, where are these inn residents gonna park? But that's not exactly, you know, what we're into here. I mean, this is whether, here's the ordinance, here it is. And whether we can find any justification to deviate from that, you know, I don't know that providing more parking is, maybe it is, but maybe it's not sufficient. Anyway, yeah, I guess we could go through them and.
Let's go through them and see. I'm gonna, at this point, before we do, I'm gonna, Kendra, with all this that you've heard this last whatever time frame it's been, prior to us going through the standards, do you have any comments or any concerns that you would like to bring up to us? Or did we confuse
Yeah,
you?
I mean, I have a few things, but I just want to kind of make sure everyone's aware of, based on, just taking quite a few notes, but, by definition, I think you guys talked about, you know, building code, residential, non-residential, commercial use. So by definition, it is a single family residence for building code. And I think we've had kind of the same questions with Grayson of, you know, on one standard, it's single family residence, and then another standard, so there is, I think, a little bit of clarification maybe on that. So I do agree with that on the fence, just so everyone knows we're happy to scoot it back a foot. I think the big thing, so because the building is right on the property line in which you see, there is 17.6 feet of road right of way. Just so everyone kind of understands that it's larger than a standard, you know, right of way, because the building is on the property line there. So a lot of times you go in the city and the property line is actually up to the sidewalk. That's not the case in this situation, just so you understand that there is 17.6 feet
Because
from,
it's right up the edge.
yes, from Griffith to our property line. So there is an extra, you know, 3 to 4 feet, depending on where you are in the city, of road right away there in terms of, you know, navigation, if you will. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here, but we did, Grayson and I, when I originally contacted him about kind of the parking layout and the 8 spots versus 11, we did kind of go through some of these ordinances and how they're interpreted. So I do definitely understand both sides, because I kind of read it as a fence, like this says a fence, this has a separation strip. So I do think there are some different interpretations, if you will. So I do understand that. What else?
Well, you did a good job at answering the standards on the application.
Yeah, yeah. and-
Sometimes we don't get anything.
Yeah. And then just in terms of the land use, you know, we've been told, once again, it's a single family residence. There's 3 permitted land uses, as I'm sure you know: single family, multifamily, and bed and breakfast. The property to the north, you know, on the same sense, is a single family residence. But it is currently being used as a rental property. So, you know, there's that to consider as well in terms of the use, and, you know, that is a residential zone as well. And we're in the transitional residential. So I think that was kind of it. We are, yeah, definitely, in terms of an inn, we are deemed a bed and breakfast, but I think that's kind of the summary. So any other questions that anyone has to kind of?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we had your feeling
Yeah,
after some
yeah.
of the questions that we had to write that came up to our consultant and attorney and amongst ourselves. So,
Yep.
okay.
And I guess my last fact on the 8 spots, you know, they do work on paper. I think in terms of maneuverability, it's a little bit more, it's not as accessible as this layout. And so as we've presented, you know, if you completely get rid of that top row, it gets you only the bottom. There's no, like, you know, middle ground. It's either the 8 as presented or, you know, this layout. There's nothing kind of in between. So thank you all for considering all the moving parts.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Deep breath, and we go. Richard, let's go around the horn here with, you want to start with number one, the standard?
Okay, that strict compliance with area setbacks, frontage, height, bulk, or density would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose or would render conformity unnecessarily burdensome. Well, I mean, I mean, at this point, we usually give the staff report and then pick what we think but so if you want me to do something else, no, let me know. But the zoning ordinance really requires just 4 parking spaces here. I mean, whether that's a proper ordinance or not, that's not exactly for us to decide. So they would like to have additional, and that would help, knowing in the real world in which we live here in Saugatuck, that's going to be a requirement. So that it would be, and if they need all those additional spaces to serve their clientele with the amount of rooms. And so to deny them that would be unnecessarily burdensome.
Okay. Yeah, the out of the standards, we'll go through the rest, but this is one of the hard ones, I think, in my opinion. Even the consultant has pretty much referenced, you could say that the comments that we see underneath this states that it really doesn't meet that standard. It doesn't demonstrate not necessarily burdensome in some ways. That first, we'll say the first half of that paragraph, the second half of the paragraph says, well, however, it does seem reasonable to accommodate it. So you could be, that's the one where I see you could be one way or the other. And it could be like yes and no, or no on that one. It's the toughest part of saying, well, is there a case where you're doing justice to the community and that type of a parking for them providing that and going above and beyond the requirement, as opposed to, well, could they meet it? Yes, but where is the other side of the coin on this one? So to me, standard number one is one of the tougher ones that I see in this review, to say, and I'm not, that's why I was earlier said, I would rather we not vote on each one of those till we go through them, or we can come back and redo that, or we can come back and make a proposal based on all of them. But I would rather we go through them and discuss them. So any more discussion on one? Anybody?
I'd like to hear Chris's thoughts on it.
I have concerns about the fact that this document refers to 134. And if we go through and say, oh, they pass it, all of it, but we're going to shift it to 142, doesn't that set a precedence for someone else coming in and saying, well, you did it for this 134 variance request, I want mine too. Like, for me, the paperwork isn't right.
Well,
And I don't like signing some paperwork, even though I know we're gonna scratch that off and put something else in. I would prefer new paperwork. So they're coming to the zoning board of appeal under 142, not 134.
well, right now we're discussing strictly 134, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, we are discussing 134. That's in front of us right now.
but
But your point
Yes.
is a table option, is what it
Yes.
is. Table option, so. And that's good for us to have this discussion.
Yes.
if it's strict 134, I don't think this is not a demand that's unnecessarily burdensome. There are other parking options.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a parking lot across the street, which is for pay that they could get a contract with, and, you know, get 5 spaces there or something. At Lulu Cadu's property, the old bank property.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't.
That's fair. Jim, any of your comments on it?
Well, I see number 1 and number 3 is tied in together. The unique circumstances of this property. We're dealing with existing construction. We're not dealing with new construction, which we did on a previous one. They had a lot more flexibility.
That's right, that was new. That was,
And we're dealing with, the building is fixed and there's only so much space left. And they've already said they're gonna put up a fence. So to have a barrier strip that can only be seen from the second floor of their property, that can never be seen by the neighbor, because the fence is gonna be on the driveway. That's where the neighbor chose to put their driveway, at the edge of the property line. So to have a barrier strip that can only be seen from the property side, which really doesn't accomplish the objective of the intent of the ordinance, to have that be the only separation, it's not. To me, it just doesn't make sense. This is a unique property. It's an existing property that goes back to 1914 when the church was put there, which is something we see in different cases in this city. So to me, it makes sense to give up that strip and put the parking spaces there and give them the ability to park all of their clients at their property. And yes, there are other options. But to me, that's what makes the sense in this case. You're tying the two together, the uniqueness of the property.
okay. Good, well, good thought. Okay, let's do number 2. Chris, if you wouldn't mind reading number 2.
That a variance would do substantial justice to the owner as well as other property owners in the district. Or whether a lesser relaxation would give substantial relief and be more consistent with justice to others.
So I got some comments on that one that basically shows that, you know, it would allow the owner to accommodate their guest, which is a pretty strong point, right? And other issues, stormwater, larger parking area. Yeah, they're proposing the fence. So to me, it seems like that one, I would say that was a yes to vote for. I mean, it does meet that. You could say that they meet that standard. I don't know. My opinion.
I would say so. What's Chris and
Chris, you guys?
Yeah, I would say so as well. Theoretically, though I'm still obviously, as well, I'm sure we all are, still bothered by the fact that this thing is gonna go right against the driveway to the, you know, but you make a valid point, as far as I can tell, that driveway, you know, is right up against the lot line.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And
That's
fences are
allowed.
legal on the lot.
and
line.
the fence is,
It's legal on the lot. line.
right.
Yeah.
So,
And that, just a sideline, that issue is gonna become even bigger now that the fire chief is insisting on 16-foot driveways. He's insisting that driveways be 16 feet wide and support an 80,000-pound vehicle as a fire truck apparatus drive. That's happening to my neighbor, Peter Hansen. Peter's appealed it 30 times in meetings with the chief and different people in the city, and nope, that's gonna stand. So that's gonna come into play.
Yeah, in the future. All right,
okay,
all right, I'll take number 3. That the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances of the property and not to general neighborhood conditions. Well, our provided comments were that, you know, the lot does comply with minimum area and requirements for the district. And that, only half the lot is available to accommodate on one side of the parking, and it meets the minimum zoning requirements. And so I think that it definitely is a situation in where this is a, I guess we always use the word unique, or a opportunity where you include the historic side of the property and the way it's set up. And you take the situation where you can provide more than what's required for the benefit of a community and the property owner in the zoning district, because it's a very tough situation in there. That I don't see that the situation is not exactly, a problem with them doing this. It's unusual. We got pretty unusual neighborhood conditions in a sense that they can provide this. That's my opinion. They can provide that. And it is an unusual situation if you add it all up between the property and where it's located and what's going on. So I would say it does meet that one. That's my opinion. Anybody else?
I pretty much agree. Right, that's as good as you're gonna get, it's pretty much agree.
Chris, anything?
I don't think it complies. Again, because they could have other parking, they could have less units. They could just have 4 parking spaces. The zoning, under 134, that zoning regulation tells me that it doesn't comply.
Okay. Jimmy?
I'd give it a yes.
Okay, and then the last one, number 4, Jim, if you want to do
That the problem is not self-created or based on personal financial circumstances. Yes, they could reduce the size of their inn, and have fewer rooms and therefore want fewer parking spaces. But what they're planning is more expensive than the smaller area with the buffer area. So it is definitely not based on personal financial circumstances. And the building pretty much dictates how many rooms they can have based on the size of the building that they're taking over. They're not expanding the building, they're making use of an existing building. So that's pretty much what seems to dictate the number of rooms. And that leads into how many parking spaces you need. So I don't see it as self-created or based on personal financial circumstances. And it ties in with the uniqueness of that building again. Everything goes back to what they're starting with, what they bought, and what they're working to preserve.
Yeah.
And yes.
that's a yes. Richard, you got any feelings? Thumbs up, thumbs
Well,
down?
like a couple of the things here, you could argue it both ways, I mean, but I'm not seeing an overwhelming financial self. Aggrandizement.
Not
Sometimes
based
I think
on
of, I can't think of simple words. All I think of is, I can't think of a big gain here. I mean, you could argue it both ways, but I'm not seeing a lot of benefit to them. Probably. And, there is some overriding thing that's this sort of, and I denied it before, but you've got kind of like, I didn't exactly deny it, but they're trying to preserve something here and that's a contributing historic district feature. And sometimes it takes this seems like it may take some leeway when you're trying to do stuff like that, and it somehow enters in here a little bit, I think, maybe. So
It has been approved by the historic district, I think. Do you have your approvals?
Yeah, they do.
Which
They do.
is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, no, that's tough, right, yeah. Chris, any feelings on number 4?
As a 142, I'm all for it. That's like 134.
140, 142 or fight.
So,
And so, okay, well, we've discussed all that. I guess I won't.
Trent, still there?
Yes, yep.
So on our, refresh my memory on meeting the standards, you know, in order to approve the application as presented, it has, you know, our proposal has to meet all four standards.
Correct. Yes, all four standards. And unlike it's just a majority vote, unlike a use variance. So it would
Say
just.
again. And does our voting, does that have to be unanimous amongst, in other words, all four on agreeing to every, or is it just unanimous, say 3 out of 4 or something like that on each?
It does not have to be unanimous. It could be passed by a majority vote as to each standard.
Right.
So like a use variance requires a 2/3 vote. It's different. This is a dimensional variance, and so a majority vote would be sufficient. So if you split like, 3-1 on a standard, that standard would be met.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's what I was saying.
It would
If we
be-
voted by standard.
It would be a majority of the 5-person board, so it takes 3 to approve. Is that
Correct.
correct, Trent?
Right.
Yes.
Which we only have 4 tonight, so it'd take 3
It takes 3 to approve
to approve, yeah.
or 3 to deny, yes.
And you go through each standard, and then if it goes, if it should happen to go that way, then the motion is made probably in that direction, and then it's a vote. And at that point, you could change your mind, depending on how the motion is presented.
I'm not sure if you're asking, but like, yeah, I think the way I would recommend going through it would be like go through each standard, and then if you get to the end and it looks as if all 4 standards have been met, you could then take a vote as to whether or not to approve or deny the variance as a whole.
Right, yeah, right now it looks like it's possible that they're met by the majority.
Right, exactly. But that's why I would say put it to a vote as to whether or not each standard was met.
Or it could be met, or it could also be met with, depending on the motion made based on adding 142.
142, I don't think requires a variance. I think you guys could make a finding content like so that remember that H5, sorry, I gotta pull it back up again.
Yes, H5.
Yeah, H5
H5,
section. Yeah, I think under that
That's what I
you
meant.
could-
That's under 142, right?
right. You could make a finding that the conditions as proposed in this application meet the requirements of 142, whether they meet them in fact or you guys relax them based on H5. So I don't think you need a variance for 142.
Okay, so you could hang, you could put your emphasis on H5 is what you're
So
saying.
we don't have to do anything for 142 in our motion. Is that
I-
what you're saying, Trent?
I don't think you do because I think the fence probably meets the requirement as listed in 142, right? Like so I don't think you would even have to reference 142 because I think they comply with it. To the
Yes,
extent that
But
you have any
but you were
concerns
gonna-
about
you were gonna
that,
Mention H5.
yeah,
No,
you
we
could
don't
mention
need to.
H5 and say that pursuant to H5 you find that the requirements of 142
No,
have
you
been
don't.
met. But I don't think that's necessary. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, okay,
So what he's saying is we don't need to mention 142 at all.
right.
Okay.
142 could be approved by Grayson administratively. and-
Yes.
Okay.
But what is in front of us is 134.
134, period.
Right, and so we'll see how we do with that.
One last comment. If they're legal to just go ahead and do it right now, pointing at 142, do we even need to meet and discuss this now? Because
If 142 was the controlling standard, that could be administratively approved with the 6-foot fence.
What they're saying, if they
But-
determined it was controlling, you know?
But what he said is both of these are controlling because they're slightly different. Now, that's their opinion tonight.
Yeah.
It's money to me, but.
It is. It is muddy. Our ordinance is muddy,
I
yes.
was here. Muddy to you, muddy to you. Yeah, very, okay. All right, so let's go through, I would like to go through the 4 standards and ask for a vote on each standard.
Could I ask Jamie a question first,
Sure.
please? Jamie? Do you have enough information from our debate to put in the findings for each of the standards?
As they're printed, as they're suggested.
Yeah,
Well, some of them,
because we typically say based upon our
Comment.
For your vote?
no, for the motion's gonna be based upon our findings and review. So the minutes have to have sufficient information to support that motion.
You want to give me that information before you go ahead and
It's-
just listen to everything you said, and I don't know where you're going with it, so go ahead and give me as much information. And before this-
except no,
Yeah, I've written down everything you said mostly, so I
Okay.
have much information,
no,
but
but see,
whatever you're
the,
going through right now and voting on, just.
We're gonna do each standard
right,
to see whether we feel that they meet all 4 standards.
I mean,
For 134 only, not 142.
Yeah. For
now,
134.
like, for instance, 1 though, we can't exactly cite that because it's, well, and if you're gonna vote in the affirmative, you really can't cite the staff
No, you would have
comments.
you would have to pull out of that.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think for number 1, if it was a positive motion, it could begin with based on the city's seasonal parking demand. So you would take that last sentence minus
Right.
the word however, and so from number 1, you take the last sentence, 2, 3, and 4, you could probably take all of it to support positive findings for 2,
Right,
3, and
yeah.
4. But number 1, you'd have to strike the first 2
follow
full
that,
sentences.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think you could also note for the reasons stated on the record at the meeting too, because I think there's been some good discussion so far.
Okay.
And that would allow Jamie to incorporate the discussion from the actual meeting.
So let me go slowly with this a little bit. We're gonna take each standard at a time. We're gonna clarify that if you're to vote yes, we will clarify what words are to be used to be for the motion. Words that would be used in our comments to either meet it or not meet it for the clerk's purposes. Example, if number 1, if we go around the table and there's majority are yeses, what Kevin's saying is you would start based on the comments, based on the city's seasonal parking demands, and that's what we are saying, that's how we see a yes. If it's a no, it's the upper part
Right.
of that. And then let's say then on number 2, you would choose maybe the whole thing,
Now I see where we're going.
okay?
Yeah.
That's what the attorney said.
Yeah.
3, I think what he said was that the 3 and 4 you could use for what we got. But I'd have to look at that again, but I believe looks like it's true. What he said.
So let me start it this way. I'll start off. I would say yes on standard number 1, that it meets standard number 1. And that is part of the comments, bottom portion, were based on city's seasonal parking demands. It seems reasonable to accommodate all guest parking on site and off street. So compliance with the landscape strip and reducing the parking lot capacity could be considered unnecessarily burdensome. That would be my vote. You could give me your vote, yes or no, and how you tell me it needs, and we'll
Okay.
decide whether it passes or not.
Okay. Is that your vote?
That's my vote.
My vote is the same as Bob's, yes. Based on the same reasoning.
No votes, right? Or are we writing down everything you say? I'm getting
No,
really
no, we're gonna,
confused by
no,
what
no,
you
you're
guys are
gonna,
doing.
you're gonna need that, that will be your that would be what we're saying it meets. That's what Jim was saying, what we gave you would go back here at the end.
Mhm.
So standard number one would get what I just read. That bottom part of the.
We started here.
We're making this as confusing as we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, but I'm telling you why, because if this goes no, then it goes no. So,
So
we have to be fair, we have to be fair to ourselves and fair to everybody.
Right.
Because sometimes we go through these and we, when we go through them, we can tell whether it's going to meet them or not. And we rush through some of that, and that's okay on some, when you have a general feeling. We didn't have a general feeling going through this prior. So, I know I'm confusing it, but it's a great way to detail it.
It needs to be detailed because the appeal is to circuit court.
Yeah, right.
All right, so we're voting, right?
Yep, you were voting. So you're up, Richard, on standard number one,
Right.
based
And-
on whether you agree with my yes or no.
I agree with I agree that, my vote would be yes, that this has met the standards for number one. And it was based on the same, reason for that
Okay,
as what you gave.
Chris, up to you. You can be a no based on the top. You can be a yes based on the bottom.
I am a no.
Okay? Chris is a no. And so it's 3-1 on that one. Okay, number two. Jim, you want to give me your,
Number
Sure.
two is that a variance would do substantial justice to the owner as well as others, and a lesser relaxation would give, or whether a lesser relaxation would give substantial relief and be more consistent. A lesser relaxation would not accomplish anything in this case. And this variance would allow the owner to reasonably accommodate all guests with on-site off-street parking, as long as the stormwater runoff is managed. And I'm assuming that our city zoning administrator will take care of that. So I feel that the variance would satisfy requirement number two.
I will agree with the way you read that and vote yes based on those comments. And Chris?
Yes.
All right, and then Richard?
Okay. Okay, I would have to vote no on that one.
Okay. Number three. Go ahead. I'll let you take that, Chris, if you want.
The plight of the owner, that the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances of the property and not to the general neighborhood conditions. While the lot would certainly provide sufficient space, use parking, the lot's relative size to the building, the dimensions required could be considered unique circumstances.
So you're saying yes?
I'm saying yes.
Okay,
And what was your reason? Did you just read part of that comment?
Yes.
I'm confused here. Can you repeat your reason for?
Well, a lot would,
Was your intent to just include all of it?
my intent was just to include what I read.
Oh, okay, then you'll have to read it full again.
That first line, while the lot would certainly provide sufficient space for residential use and parking, that's relative size to the building required for a commercial parking lot would be considered unique circumstances.
and he's a yes based on what he read. Follow that?
Yes,
Are you a yes?
yes, I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
Oh, I'm a yes. Yeah, I mean, I can agree with more verbiage than he cited, but
But
Yeah.
that's enough.
And number 4. We'll do 4. That the plight of or that the problem is not self-created or based on personal financial circumstances. Well, as the comments say, while it could be argued that the smaller parking lot or fewer guest rooms could be proposed, seasonal parking demand in the city of Saugatuck and the need to accommodate as much on-site and off-street parking as possible are not self-created. And that additionally, incorporating a larger 11-car parking lot with fence screening is not financially advantageous or compared to a smaller compliant or parking lot. Or even an 8, or larger 8. So I would say yes on that one, on the full comment.
I would say yes.
Richard?
I would say yes.
I say no.
Okay, all right. So that's why I did that. The majority, we've had a couple were unanimous and well, they're all unanimous, let's put it that way. Well, 3 out of the 4 met all of them. And a couple of them were 2 of them that were not met all 4 of votes. But what we've gone through here is we have read through the standards and we have decided that majority of the board have voted yes, that it does meet the 4 standards as read and housed and as presented. Does anybody have any discussion prior to working out a motion? Or do you feel we're ready to go to a motion?
I think we're ready.
Ready.
This,
I may not be ready for the make formulate the motion.
Jim, you want to make a motion then?
well, let me take a shot at it and see what we think. I move based upon findings for each of the 4 standards controlling variance approval.
Speak slower.
Slower.
Yes, I may.
Thank you. Could you please start over?
That's all right.
Thank you.
I move based upon findings for each of the 4 standards as documented in the meeting minutes. To approve the variance request related to section 154-134 GI submitted by Kendra Shearhorn
Can you repeat that? Variance request based upon what?
related to section 154.134, paragraph G and I. Excuse me, submitted by Kendra Shearhorn. To construct an 11-space parking lot at 250 Mason Street in the rear yard without a 5-foot northern landscape separation strip. This approval is based upon the board's findings related to section 154 155B.
Okay. You
Done.
want to read that back or are you able to?
Sure. Move to approve based upon findings for each of the floor standards as described in meeting minutes to approve variance requests related to 154.134 G and I. Submitted by applicant Kendra Shearhorn. If I got that wrong, apologize. To construct 11 space parking lot at 250 Mason Street in rear yard without 5-foot northern landscape separation strip based on board's findings related to 154.155B.
Yeah, the approval is based on that. That's right. You did get the word approval, right?
Move to approve, yes,
The
sir.
approval is based on the board's findings. Okay.
One quick correction, it's paragraph G1, not GI.
Oh, G1, excuse me.
Hard to tell. I wondered about that, but I thought, oh, well, you never know.
So I'll amend my motion to include paragraph 154.134 G1.
All right. Either one of you guys like to second the motion? Second. Chris will second the motion. And then we will like to go for final vote on the motion that we have in front of us, if we would have a call.
Howe,
Yes.
Crawford,
Yes.
Raphael,
Yes.
Bazia.
Yes. Whew. Okay, we have gone through the standards and we have approved the application as submitted. Noting our findings, took us a while to get to those. Andrew, I guess beyond that, you get with Grayson
Did you
and,
close your public hearing?
no, not yet.
Okay.
So if you would choose to do that, you have to meet all the other underlying things, but, so. Okay, at this point, we go back to my agenda, if I can find it anymore. It was right here. All right, number 7, any communications? Sorry, I now want to close the public hearing. Communications, number 7. Anyone have any communications?
No.
Okay, let's move on to number 8, commissions. Any comments from
I
our,
guess that was communications from the others. I don't have any comments.
no comments, anything, you guys? I do appreciate you got the printouts right so that we got single-sided
Yes.
and where it makes sense and in fact, all single-sided, which is really great. So that's good. But we talked about getting the important pieces of paper single-sided and double-siding the ones that were not as action item type of thing. So I appreciate that. Number 9, public.
I had-
Oh, do you have one?
One comment. Yeah,
Huh?
I appreciated the discussion that we had tonight.
Okay,
And we don't always agree, but it's important that we all make our opinions known and what are we basing those on? So I appreciated that.
well, and also from our consultants and
Yes.
and legal side, so appreciate that, and even the applicant staying, and of course, Jamie putting in the time here to go through this, so,
Sorry, it took a while.
yeah. Number 10, we can adjourn.
Oh, I make them,
Oh,
I
motion
believe we
adjourned?
need, I make a motion for adjournment.
Go ahead.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
They
Adjourn.
tend to like that.
Thank you for the voice.
It's the more recent years.